Hi. In this video, we're going to take a look at hypothesis testing. So we're just going to consider what a hypothesis testing is and what are the elements that we need for hypothesis testing, and finally, what are the methods for hypothesis testing. So first of all, I want to find out what a hypothesis is. So a hypothesis is simply a statement about a parameter of a population. And we know that parameters in a population that we know of is the population mean or the population proportion. So based on the information about the sample, we're going to make some inferences about the parameter of the population. An example of such parameter is that 57% of people vote Fine Gael, and 57% is some population parameter. We're going to carry out statistical investigation to build the sample proportion, and then based on our statistics, we're going to be able to test whether it is true that 57% of people vote Fine Gael. And in order to do that, we're going to carry out a hypothesis test, which investigates whether a statement can be considered true at a given level of significance. And for Leaving Cert, the only level of significance that we really concern ourselves with is 5%. And the meaning of the level of significance is that if this statement about a parameter of the population was said to be true, then at 5% level of significance, 1 out of 20 times we make this claim based on the sample that we collect, 1 out of every 20 times we would make that claim incorrectly. So we would build a sample, and the sample proportion would indicate that 57% of people do indeed vote Fine Gael. So we say yes, that this statement is true, but in 1 out of 20 cases we would be wrong. And we just need to take this into consideration when we're doing hypothesis testing. Anyway, there are 3 methods that we need to be familiar with for hypothesis testing for the Leaving Certificate. So the first one is using z-values, the z-scores that we already know how to calculate. The second one is using confidence intervals, so you probably call that from more recent classes. And finally, using p-values, which are slightly new, but not by much. It's just a little different, slightly different flavor for the z-values. So in order to carry out a hypothesis test for a Leaving Cert problem, these are the steps that we are going to need to take. So first of all, we're going to state what the null hypothesis H0 is and the alternative hypothesis H1. So the null hypothesis is the hypothesis that we're assuming to be true, and a hypothesis, alternative hypothesis H1 is a statement that we're going to test for. We're always going to assume that H0 is true, and we're always going to test for H1. And that's the nature of hypothesis testing. We're also going to state the level of significance, which is always going to be 5% for the Leaving Cert, but outside of Leaving Cert in actual statistical problems, this could be something like 1%, this could be something like 20%, depending on the application where the statistical test is carried out. And then finally, we're going to calculate the test statistic, or find the confidence interval, and then or find p-value. And based on the result of our test statistic, confidence interval, or the p-value, we're going to state our conclusion. We're going to either reject or not reject the null hypothesis. And note, we don't focus on the alternative hypothesis. All we do is we state whether the null hypothesis H0 can be rejected or whether it cannot be rejected based on the evidence. And there are 3 different ways in which we do that. So test statistic, CI, and the p-values. Finally, in this video, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the H0, the null hypothesis. So we always assume it's true. It's the claim that we're going to test, similar as in the first example, 57% vote FG. This will be our H0. H0 is 57% of people vote Fine Gael. Now, our alternative hypothesis in this case would be it's not 57%. That's essentially it. And the way we would state this would be something as simple as H0 equals to, we would say population proportion equals to 57%, and H1 population proportion does not equal to 57%. Something as simple as that. It's not that difficult at all in order to deal with this problem. So that's essentially the null hypothesis, and that's it for this video. In the next video in this series, we'll take a look a little bit more closely at each of the three methods: the z-value, confidence interval, and p-value, the methods which we use in order to find population parameters and carry out hypothesis testing. So thank you for watching.